and I'm Caroline Jackson Levy. I'm the Managing Director of UBM Awards. I've been running awards for 20 odd years, so I've known the bad times and the good times, and here we are in the bad times again. But I hope very much that I can bring some of the experience I've had, both in the commercial sector and the public sector of running awards, to shine a bit of light on how you run an award ceremony when you've got no money in your pocket to spend. Just before I start and bringing into that commercial public sector, could I have a quick show of hands, those of you who are not in the business of running awards for profit? Okay. That's very useful. Some of you, therefore, are, and you'll understand that there are imperatives about how you make money out of awards when you've got a lower budget. But for those of you who are either in production companies or suppliers or others, I hope there are enough top tips in here for you to understand where a client is coming from when they're running an award ceremony with a lower budget. Okay, so we'll be going over a few top tips, but some of the things I'd like to put into this presentation are the hidden consequences when you find that actually your budgets have been slashed. There are obvious consequences. You've got less money to spend, but what are the hidden things that you weren't aware of when that happened to you? How you measure success when your typical measures of success have disappeared. For those of us who do run awards for profit, it's very easy to know when you've been a success because you've made money at the end of the day. When that's not possible, how do you measure how well you've done? And if you should be fortunate enough to sell to a sponsor, how do you keep them? If you are a sponsor, what is it that you should be demanding in terms of return on investment when you're working with a company at times like this for award ceremonies? So that's the agenda. Whether you have got money in your budget or not, the fundamentals don't change in terms of running an award ceremony. And this is always true. So let me explain what I mean by that. Often we ask after our award ceremonies, and we run in the company at UBM around 40 award ceremonies a year, and I've done quite a few elsewhere. If I ask you to think about an award ceremony that you've been to that was absolutely dreadful, and if I then ask you to think about that and you were to rank the things that you really gave a thumbs down to, typically when I've done this exercise, these are the things that people complain about. The catering is always number one. The catering was rubbish. The chicken was cold. The beef was sloppy. Where you were sat, you were behind a pillar, you couldn't see anything, or the sound was really poor, you couldn't hear anything, or the set looked disastrous. Service, those of you who might have been to any hotel where the gravy was spilt over your left shoulder, you'll often talk about that. Were you too hot or cold? Then you'll talk about the host being quite mediocre and the entertainment wasn't all that. So in terms of ranking, in your fundamentals, whether you've got 100,000 or 100 million or 100 pounds to run an awards, you have to make sure that these are right. But actually, if I ask you then to think about an award ceremony you've been to that was really top-notch, absolutely fantastic, people always say, well, I gave the thumbs up because it had a great host. So you don't get thanked for getting the fundamentals right. You won't get thanked that nobody spilt gravy over your shoulder, but you've got to get it right. But if you invest in your host, no matter what your budget, people will remember your event. So the key about award ceremonies and running awards is survival. Excuse me, I'm very nasal. I've had sinusitis, which is ghastly, whether in a recession or not. Anyway, survival. You've got to juggle three things. We have a very good publisher who always said the things that you need to juggle and to get right if you're running an award ceremony or if you are intending to sponsor one or be a production company for one is this an event that people simply must sponsor, they must enter, and they must attend? How do you do that? The one thing I've done throughout my career is decided that if I've got to get these three things right in terms of juggling, I need to make sure that our judging is credible. If you're going to win an award, then you need to know that there's been credible judging, authentic judging behind it. Too many times I've worked with companies, for companies, who say, well, I'll tell you what, this was actually the company that won, but they don't advertise in our magazine very much, so we'll give it to them first prize. If you're running an award ceremony, or if you're associated with an award ceremony that lacks credibility, you need to think again and you need to stop it. Because actually in a recession, when the competition is very fierce and you can easily be killed off, you need to look at your credibility. So what happens in a recession? I don't want to, explain the bleeding obvious, but clearly we have tighter budgets, we have fewer guests, and there are fewer sponsors around to tap up for some support. People are buying tickets rather than tables. I don't know if you found this, but certainly we have, where we might have sold 10 tables to one client in a year. We're now lucky if we're selling to the same person 10 seats. And that obviously puts a lot of pressure on what we're doing. The return on investment, the demand from sponsors, from customers, from clients is higher than ever, and we'll come to that a little later. And also in a recession, people are more reluctant to celebrate. If you are in a company where unfortunately there may have been redundancies, or things are really tight and the results have been poor, the last thing you want to be seen to be doing often is buying a table, buying champagne, and having a rip-roaring evening when people back in the office are feeling low. So all of those things in a recession we've seen have affected our events, and they may be affecting yours. But there can be, as always, an upside in a downturn if you can hang on. So what happens? Well, there are some suppliers I know in the room. There are some good production companies in this room, actually. And you will find in a recession, quite understandably, that people are more willing to talk to you, to do business, and to negotiate with you. This is not a time in a recession to be shy. I think people who work in events, I'm going to make gross generalizations. We don't particularly like poring over figures and P&Ls, and we don't really like pushing all the time for the hardest negotiation because we're creative and we like to be fluffy and making things look fantastic. Actually, this is the time to push. We have found, you may find, that you can actually get a date in a hotel when there's a recession because there's availability, finally, as competition falls away. You can actually call the Grosvenor House at the moment and get a date, which is quite unusual, and you certainly can't do that when times are good. Your competition can be killed off. Probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, early noughties, you could be in a sector where there might be 2, 3, or even 4 awards supplying the same sector. I remember going to a print event where there were 3 print awards throughout the year, each of them serving the same dish of chicken and a mushroom sauce. How anybody remembered which awards they were going to, I don't know, but it didn't matter because we were awash with sponsorship and with money. Those things have stopped, and now, more often than not, you might find 2 similar events in a market, but perhaps even just the one. You just have to make sure that one is you.